welcome to the 5th Annual Guild of Music Supervisors State of Music in Media Conference.
All right, everybody, welcome to the panel. This obviously we're going to be discussing today the final mix prep, and we have our panel here, and I'm going to introduce them by name and let them kind of talk a little bit about themselves to give a background. To my immediate right here is Anton Monsted. Anton, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Oh yeah, sure. Hi everybody. I'm currently the head of soundtracks at the Capitol Music Group, and prior to that, I was at 20th Century Fox for 5 years, and I guess I cut my teeth as a music supervisor. I did 4 films with Baz Luhrmann, starting with William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, then Moulin Rouge, Australia, and The Great Gatsby, by which stage I think I was looking for a change in career and direction. So, but now I've kind of come full circle. So anyway, hope we can bore you with, I will certainly bore you with Baz Luhrmann stories for as long as you'll let.
Next to us is Joseph DeBeasi.
DeBeasi.
DeBeasi. See, I still couldn't get it right. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Joseph.
My name is Joseph DeBeasi. I am a composer and music editor. I wrote the underscore for American Sniper, Alpha, a few other independent films I've music edited on, Sicario, The Revenant, Prisoners, Wind River, most of my career has been through music editing and composition, and I've just been weaving in and out as I get calls and what people have asked for. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for having me, and excited to see what we're going to talk about.
Aren't we all?
And on the end down there, on the end there is Jeff Cardoni. Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Cardoni, composer for film and TV. I've been out here for going on 20 years. I guess my first big break, I was about to leave town. I was living in a hotel by the airport.
Oh my.
Literally a week away, and I got a chance to demo on this show called CSI Miami back in '03, and I got a call literally sitting in the parking lot in Denny's in the shitty airport hotel. And so I bought myself some more time, and 16 years later, yeah. So I do Silicon Valley on HBO now, and Kaminsky Method on Netflix, and a bunch of films, and blah, blah, blah. So thanks for coming.
Great story.
It's a Hollywood story.
Yeah, it's classic, man.
All right, to start the discussion off, I'm going to let Anton, as a supervisor and experienced person in that area, kind of get things rolling. Let's start the conversation from your point of view.
Well, it's funny. So I was thinking about this a lot, over the last week or so about. I'm probably pretty prone to speaking in metaphors, and I'm like, because I'm always having to explain to my kids what I do for a living, and even my parents to this day are like, you're a composer, right? And I'm like, no, I'm not a composer. I'm a music supervisor. Please let me explain to you why there's a difference. And when I was talking to my kids about this panel and about, how to explain what the idea of, good final mix prep is, I said, I guess it's like you're putting on a dinner party, and so you know that a bunch of guests are going to be turning up at a certain time, and they're going to come into your house and they're going to be sitting down, and it's going to be super embarrassing if you're the reason that there isn't food on the table. But it's not just food. It's like, do you want flowers? Do you want candles? Do you perhaps want to have red wine or white wine? All these decisions have to be made progressively in the lead up to the final mix. And when you get to the final mix, you, particularly as a music supervisor, I think you shift gears because, and this will be a throw to you in a minute, is that really you're there to serve the mix process. And that means really a lot of the kind of decision making that has brought you this far on the journey, and whether that's song selection or song selection plus alternatives, and the same goes for the score, that you've got score cues, then you've got alternative mixes of score cues, and if you're me and the directors I've worked with, you've also got the temp score cues as they've gotten used to them in the Avid over the last 12 months. All these things have to be on hand, and they have to be all in one place and very accessible by the music editor, so that the final mix doesn't derail itself. And I think final dub situations are prone to derailment, and I really see the supervisor's job as being the hub of communication and the person who knows all the moving parts of the dub and where to find everything and how to get things to be in the right place at the right time so that there's food on the table when people want to eat.
Oh, well,
That's
Yeah,
sorry.
that's a good analogy.
perfect. It's good.
Yeah.
Good analogy. Joseph, as an editor, composer, you've kind of played both sides of those.
I would say that I think that's a great analogy. Without getting too technical, and yet it does get very technical. When we get to the dub stage scenario, a lot of things come into play, not only just the creative choices that were made, but also how are these things delivered. A lot of times we'll get songs that are MP3s. They won't stand up on a big screen. Or we'll get a master that is CD quality. That's really not that great either. But it's hard to get masters that are 24/48. But we do what we can. A lot of it is corralling bits and pieces of music that are coming from multiple sources. Composer, the composer's mixer, come from the picture editor who has cut a music, and they deliver you an AAF, and you got to bring that in, match edit that, make sure that's prepped. The other aspect is knowing who your mixer is. Where are you mixing? What dub stage are you mixing? How do they handle music? And how do they want it for them to lay out on a console? So again, I don't want to get too technical, but it's really important to know how to take this food, to stay with that analogy, and how to set the table. And with options and with good edits, so it doesn't sound like it's edited. It sounds like it flows with the story, because story is king. It always will be. The most important thing that we're doing is serving the story. So yeah, that would be like an overview. And I know as we go, I think specific questions would be really helpful that you might have. Otherwise, there's so many ways we can go and discuss it. That we can go down a tangent, and you'd be like, "That was boring."
I think we will have a moment.
We're in the dark.
You're dimming the lights back
I
there.
like the light thing. It's good. It's better dim. I like it. Yeah, it's better down.
I don't think the camera's right now, right?
Thanks for the move. I think we will have a question and answer period here at some point. I kind of wanted to let everybody kind of get talking.
Yes,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
That is going to actually bring in other aspects of it.
Yeah.
I mean, from Jeff's point of view, you as a composer, which I also will bring it back to it after Jeff kind of talks about composing from that standpoint, because there is that element of everyone has a different relationship with the production team as far as the director and the producers and what their communication is. Obviously, as a composer, you're very tight with that aspect of the creation side of what they're trying to, what they're
Right.
going for.
Right.
Can you speak on that, please?
Yeah. I mean, as a composer, like dub stage prep is getting drunk the night before because you're done. Like once you hit send, by the time it's going to the dub stage for us, it's all been approved. All the hard stuff has already happened. You've had all the notes and the playbacks, and so it's all fun as a composer. So I love when you hit that final send, knowing that it's going onto his plate now and he's got to deal with it.
But don't you ever get those phone calls that go,
No.
"So can you give us a rewrite of this stem?" No? Oh my gosh.
Not that
Wow,
fake.
lucky
I
composer.
know.
Lucky
Not in a
composer.
long
My
time. No,
goodness.
but
Yeah.
no, but like, not joking too much. Like you have to like the big thing as a composer is you stem it. You deliver your score in stems. So meaning you have a full mix without being boring, but you might have, orchestra, drums, synths, guitars, piano, like 4 or 5 stems. just so they have, and that all will add up to the stereo mix. So if you play the stereo mix or mute that and play the stems, it'll sound the same. And so on the stage, if something's bugging someone, they'll be able to mute something and carve out something. Yeah, I mean, some people are super precious about it, but for me, once it leaves my final mix on it, they can do whatever they want to it, because it's there to help them. It's not what I want it to sound like, and that's true. And you have to realize that that's the job. They need to get what they want out of what you deliver. It's not if it's the perfect mix and they pissed you off because they turned something down, but that doesn't matter. You know, you have your mix that you like, and you listen to that. And, but so yeah, delivering in stems. And also figuring out if it's 5/1 or not. You know, films all these days, everything's 5/1, and most TV is, but on TV we usually don't deliver in 5/1 score. I don't, unless we recorded an orchestra in 5/1. There's no point to make it more complicated than it needs to be, so just deliver stereo stems, and then they'll spread that out. So
I was going to ask you that about whether or not you would send in 5/1s or not. So for you, it's okay not to have a surround mix of a sound that you would like to present?
Well, because I think that's unless it's something specific, I think it's the mixer. We all have our little creative hand in the pie, you know, but that last thing is the dubbing mixer. So it's his time to be creative, you know, and so I don't want to handcuff someone having something flying around just because I had 5/1 in my room.
Right,
I wanted to. So, I give them a lot of flexibility, and if it's not recorded in 5/1, which is an orchestra, then making some synth in the fake 5/1 at home is just a waste of time, and then they're going to get 20 tracks instead of 5, and it's just, I don't know. I like to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point to bring out. Yeah.
But that is a good point. I would guess that, and maybe you could speak on that, whether it's a television production and whether it's a film. I mean, obviously a bigger budget film, big sound, big room, Atmos, and all that stuff. That's where the 5/1, I would think, or 7/1 would be something they want it delivered in purposely.
Well, you listen in 5/1 on everything, though.
When
we're dubbing. So
but, I mean,
whether it's TV or film, it's still in the big.
Sure, but I'm just thinking because they're theater mixing for theater, it's sometimes they want that delivery, I would guess. Is that reasonable?
Are you asking me about that?
Well, from the standpoint of music supervisors, that's something that you would look for. I mean, is it dictated by the supervisor what the composer maybe is going to deliver to the editor, or the editor to the stage, and that kind of thing? Or
that's interesting. I mean, I actually hadn't thought about that, because everything I've ever done is always 5/1.
Right.
And now increasingly beyond 5/1.
Right.
And and it's funny too, because I remember when mixing in 5/1, the early days where Pro Tools systems would, give up the ghost, regularly, because they couldn't handle it. And it's funny. I mean, I think that's something we're always coming up against as well. Is what are the limitations of the technology? But I think 5.1's has been the standard for a long time now.
Sure. Okay. Let's going back to the composer side. I mean, how much do you rely on the editor to try to keep your music as true as you intended for the way what you played for the director?
Yeah, of course. But yeah, I mean, their job becomes different once it's out, once they're there, because they're getting it from the music editor is pretty much like ground zero of making everything run on the dub, because everything is in that session, all the music, and so you have to have a good relationship with them. You have to know that they have your back. You have to know that they can not get flustered, and they can deal with all the people in the room. Because if you get on a dub stage, there's a lot of people in there sometimes, and everyone has, some people are better and some people are not, and you just have to know the dynamic. Sometimes it's a really jokey, light-hearted thing, and sometimes it's like a war room in there. And you're just, and sometimes it's usually on the comedies that it's the most stressful thing ever, and like a dark drama, everyone's joking around. So I can't figure it out, but there's a dynamic, and so the music editor's got to be. They're sitting in there, and you might be on the phone telling them something you want, but they're in the room hearing what the director and the producer wants, and a lot of times that might be two different things, and they got to figure out how to weigh that dynamic and make everyone happy at the end of the day. but they're taking bullets for everyone, because they're there all the time, and I stay away from the dub as much as possible because it's just, it's
Well, and it's
stressful.
another opportunity for them to go, hey, could you make this change?
Yeah.
And you'd be like, but I
again,
delivered.
Yeah, and again, but that's why you give them stems, and they have all. And if you're not there, then they just make it work with what you have usually. And it always works out.
Well, that's kind of one of my questions, whether or not you are ever at the dub, but apparently not.
I
that
go
often.
towards the end, but I don't sit there the whole time because it's.
So you can just smile and say, "Yeah, that's great, thank you."
Yeah. I mean, the dub is like the final mix when they're, the final week on a film or whatever, when they're mixing at the stage, and it's like watching paint dry. I mean, it's pretty slow sometimes, you know what I mean? Because it's like, especially if you're in music, because like they'll get to a scene where your music comes in, you're like, oh, cool, I'm gonna get to hear this, and then they'll stop 3 seconds into it and go back 50,000 times over those three. Like, it's so much start and stop, and like,
let's get that bird.
Like, can we just hear this one time through and hear how good it sounds? So like, there's a lot of that. So when you go at the end, it's usually they'll play the whole reel, and you can listen and give notes on the whole reel. But when you're sitting there in the beginning, it's just tedious.
Also, I think, look, for music people, and I think we're biased in favor of the music.
Right.
I think often the final dub comes with a fair degree of disappointment because certainly I'm always the one going, do you think the music could be just like a little bit louder? Like, could I hear it? Because, because you often realize how much thought and decision-making went into the lead up to, day 6 of the final dub. You go, well, we labored over that, and we labored over the placement, and then it everybody in the room goes, no, it sounds really great. We're moving on, and you go, but all I heard was the rustling of branches, and footsteps, through the forest. I didn't hear that beautiful cue. And Jeff, I think you're maybe the exception to the rule here, because most composers I work with come in and they sit there very still and they listen, and then they go, Anton, could I have a word with you outside? And then you go outside and they're like, what the fuck? That's a 100-piece orchestra recorded at Abbey Road, and they lose their mind because they, and it's that's part of the job, I think, of a music supervisor, is to try and find a kind of a diplomatic through line where you go, okay, well, I think it's important too, and let's go and find the right moment to present a case for revisiting that cue.
Right.
So you really kind of become the lobbyist for the music, as opposed to the sound effects supervisor, who is the lobbyist for the sound.
Of course,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
very much.
there's always that struggle. Right?
Playing on team music, yes.
Well, and it's really important, again, I'll go back to story. What is serving the story? Because
Exactly.
sometimes the music may not be serving the story as much as a moment within sound.
Yeah.
And it's also really important to have a really good relationship with the director, because in the end, that is where the yay or nay will happen. And if the director is really loving the piece of music, it will have its due, its shine. If the director's been ambivalent on this particular cue, it may not find its way. But that's really okay, because it's about serving the story. Many times when I see that a piece of music is kind of iffy, I'm always asking, is it in the right place? Is it the right kind of music? Are we telling the right story here? Maybe it needs to start later. But when it's a piece of music that everybody loves, it shines.
Yeah,
And
that's very true.
It just fits right in, and even sound people are like, yeah, this is where it goes, and
Yeah.
it feels right. And I think in terms of preparation, it's really knowing what cues are working that way, what cues are not working that way. To know, okay, this is going to be an iffy situation with this one. And maybe you have alternates, or maybe the composer would be talking to the music editor and say, look, we know this is kind of iffy, but we have this stem and this stem and this stem. I've also got this alt, and then it's like finding the way to communicate with the director what's going to work and what's going to help best tell that story.
There's also like a dynamic too in there, in that like sometimes the director doesn't know, like they don't know what is right.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's interesting because music supervisors are so important because I feel like they're like in the inner circle. Like they're just trusted, you know, they're cool. Like like it feels like they are like trusted. You know, the director's going to turn to the music supervisor and say, "What do you think about?" They're not going to turn to the composer usually.
Right.
You know, like, for some reason, like, even at the end of a film, you still don't know if they like you half the day. You know, you're still trying to get in that circle. And like day one, Anton's
That's
like
awesome.
in the room.
That
you know
is
what I mean? Like,
yeah.
but like they can like when something's going down, like they can just by saying the right comment at the right time, like can totally change how something's perceived. You know, like because something will play and no one knows who's going to talk first, and like whoever talks first can influence how everyone else is going to talk.
God.
If someone says
It's the domino effect.
If someone says something, that thing's going down. Like you know, and then it can go from something that's been in there for 3 months to one person, the first person talks, saying, "I don't know about that," and then next thing you know,
it's exactly
so
right.
frustrating, but like, if they say, or you can like sometimes like. I could see a song's in trouble, I'll be like, that song is really good. And it can turn it. Like,
I really agree with that. I mean, I would say on every show I've ever worked on, there are maybe half a dozen musical problem areas. And no matter what happens, you can preview the film 4 times, you can, recut scenes, you can come up with 20 alternatives. For some reason, I don't know why, you can't decide whether it's going to be a song moment or a score moment. It's, I don't know, I mean, we could talk about that for like 3 hours and I won't bore you with it, but they are sometimes that they are corners in the storytelling process where the road just hasn't been laid at the right camber, and getting around that corner, everybody goes, oh, it must be the music. The music's terrible. And you go, that's not always the reason. Sometimes it has to do with the rhythm of the picture editorial or with an actor's performance. But ultimately, because of the nature of the final mix being the final mix, it comes down to, there are only a few variables left by the time you're on the final dub. And
true.
Music tends to have to take on the burden of these problem areas. And those are the areas where so often, I'm always like the optimist. I'll be like, well, that was good, and everybody will give me a kind of stormy look, like, you suck. And then, but what you realize is you're trying to make up for the fact that sometimes there are other variables at play.
Right.
And it's not just about the music. But sometimes it is about the music, and that's, a lot of directors I've worked with, will say, "Oh, well, how did that moment? What did we have? What did we have in the temp on the director's cut? Right. I like this. I like that scene then, and I hate it now. Right. Why do I hate it?" And everybody's looking at their watch because they're either going like, "It's 11 at night and they want to go home," or they're looking at their watch going, "When that director stops talking, I can actually get some work done." But being able to go back in time has become an increasingly, valuable thing that, when I was starting out in my career, you couldn't do that as easily. You had to, it was a much bigger forensic dig to go back to an earlier version of something. Now, if everybody's prepped and, has thought about this moment maybe occurring on the dub stage, you can go just one moment, I'll open up that session and we'll have a look at it together, and you can kind of get through that moment in 10 minutes rather than in,
And how often do you think that happens like that? Is it more?
On a Baz Luhrmann film, like all the time.
I guess it depends, doesn't it? Yeah.
It depends on the filmmaker.
Because I was going to say, sometimes when you're talking about music, it's also being able to talk the talk of the filmmaker.
Yes.
I've used this almost as a joke sometimes when they describe sounds and colors.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they do. And you're like, okay, it's not blue. I don't know what that means, but so from that standpoint, I think how you can talk to them.
Yeah.
That comment sends shivers down everyone's spine. Can we see what was in the Avid or see what was in the temp? Because when you hear that, trouble's coming. But it happens a lot.
And the other thing, and going back to why I suggest knowing who your mixer is, they have so much influence. Because they'll come and say, well, I'm fresh ears, so, and this is how it's affecting me. And they're the ones that are blending everything and placing it in a room with imaging. So if they turn and they say to the director, not really sure, not feeling it, or the other way around, I think this works amazing, they can turn the tide of, oh, well, let's look at it again. So it's really important to know who these people are, what films they've mixed, and just, if you get to talk to them ahead of time, I think it's really great. I know I do. I communicate with every mixer ahead of time, knowing what we're going to be bringing to the stage, and they've already seen the movie. They may have even done some dialogue pre-dubs, or they may have even done the temp. And so they know what's coming. And there's this collaboration and a teaming that I find invaluable for what it is that we're bringing to the stage musically.
Another big thing just that we have to fight with is that it's just always different on the dub stage than it was. People have been sitting in an Avid room for months hearing this thing 24 hours a day. And then so just by being in a different environment, it sounds different, and it's not worse or better, but it's different. And you got to fight with, I just finished something where a cue is signed off on. I recorded live strings on the new one, sent it to the dub. It sounded a million times better, but it freaked them out because it sounded different. They went, can we see what was in the Avid? And they pulled up my crappy mix, and they ended up using that. And it sounded way worse, but they're just used to it. And it's really hard to get past that, what people are used to. And that's something we have to fight a while too.
And just piggybacking on that, because I've been in editorial, I've worked with picture editors, and when you hear what they're working with, you see the speakers that they're working with, it's like, oh my gosh, the fidelity on this is horrible. And then you go to a dub stage where it's full frequency. They're just not used to hearing all these highs and all these lows. It's exactly that situation. And so, again, as much as massaging we can do along the way, the prepping, it's not going to sound like that. It's sounding in here, it's pretty muddy. Out there, it's going to sound really full and lush. Well,
that's when you're doing songs and you would take your mixes out to the car to listen to how it sounded in the car. That was the test. But you can't take a theater out to your theater to listen to, So it's my inclination is you have to trust the mixer. They know what it sounds like in here, they know what it's going to translate to out in the real world. But a lot of times the producer or the director don't know that, and they don't trust that. We got to trust this guy because he knows I'm going to make these sound effects super loud, but when you take it out and you put it somewhere else, it's going to be just right. And so a lot of times I think the mixes suffer because they'll get it to where it sounds right in here, but the guy knows that it's not right. It's not, when you take what's in here out somewhere else, it's not going to be as good as it can be. And so it's tough.
It's an interesting dynamic though to navigate, because once you get to the final dub, I think you've got these different captains. I think you've got the director who hopefully they're still working on being captain of story and doing a great job of that. But actually, the mixer is the captain of the process and of the room, and that can bring its challenges. And particularly, look, working in the studio system, wait until the head of the studio turns up and pops their head in.
And you have studio
then you've got a new complication in the room, and it's
they can undo all the other.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Right.
I think it needs to be more red. That's what they're going to say, right? So in that regard, you do have those kind of influences going, and really you're sometimes in a different room, in a different environment, and you do have to trust the mixer because they know the room. So your relationships with the mixer is part of it.
Yeah, very much.
And so it's like who you work with, who you work with, and of course those decisions are usually probably made somewhere else by some other factor that just, here's your mixer. It helps if you know them or know of them. So how do you relate to that? Is there people that you particularly like to work with that you recommend sometimes? Or is there any of that kind of goes on? Or
I don't think I have any say in that ever.
I don't think I've ever had a say in it as well, because there's so many variables in the situation. It's economics, it's studio.
right.
You know, it's whoever the sound
Right.
supervisor has,
Sure,
been brought on for the film, and then where they decide where to go.
Well, economics, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, budgets are changing rapidly. I had a discussion the other day with an organization I belong to, and there's a lot of sound editors, which is what I'm a member of. And it was interesting to listen to them talk about how budgets have changed radically and how things get kind of hidden in here and hidden in there. And someone, okay, this is your budget, but it doesn't include deliverables, or maybe it does. And from the standpoint of music, how does that work? I mean, it's like, you're given a budget for the final product, and you have to deal with that in itself, right? So how do you, getting down to the point of, is there a deadline? You only have so much money to spend on this. We got to go to final prep for this. I mean, at what point do you just kind of say, this is it? This is what I got to do, or what I have to do? I mean, does that decision ever come, or does it still come back to, the director going, no, let's do that again, or no, that's not what I want, or
Nobody wants to answer that.
stop the camera.
Pass.
All right, well, I'll just say this about it. The budgets get smaller and the time gets less.
Yeah.
And so, but you're still asked to create the same magnificent piece. So, you're not in control. If they're saying, here's $5 and I need $25 worth of something, that you do your best. And I think they meaning people who are making budgets, rely on your integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because your name is on it, and you're not going to turn out something that sounds terrible. So, it's a really difficult balance to find a way to say, well, you're giving me $5, but you want $25 worth of something. Can I get 10? How do I bridge the gap? Can I give you a $15 product? They don't want to hear that. It's really, it's difficult. And I think in the end, our own integrity is what's important. And it ebbs and flows. Sometimes you get paid really, really well. Here's $100, give me a $10 product. It balances out. I mean, would you say that to be true on your end as well? Like sometimes it's like it just balances out. This project actually paid for that project.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think the process is the same regardless of what financially, if I'm doing an independent film where it's not so good as opposed to a studio film where there's more, but the process is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like once you decide to do something, you do it as good.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't do less because it doesn't pay as much, or and so the
Exactly.
process is no different for me. And it's like, it might be, well, we can't use this big orchestra on this one,
Yeah.
so we'll use a quartet or something. But besides that, the job's exactly the same. It doesn't change anything.
As far as what you're delivering, you're delivering. So that's basically what you're saying. It's just this you're still to come up with the same product at the stage point.
Yeah, it's not like I'm going to do my crappy version of this because it's
Right, of course.
And anything, I mean, because you just never know what's going to be what. You got to do your best on everything because
Yeah.
you don't know who's going to see what, and I'd rather lose money on something and it be really good and something I'm proud of than make a few
Yes.
bucks and someone hear it and think this guy's terrible. So you just figure it always works out.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't know. I mean, I personally I never got into this for money. I don't know if any
Right.
musician who's sane ever gets into it because they want to make money. That's just like
No, but I mean, sometimes I'm just thinking that sometimes the budget might limit what you, like you say, you use strings and you didn't use the strings,
Right.
but you
yeah. But
hired the
besides that,
strings.
we're sitting in a studio with computer and guitars and some players, and that's
Yeah.
costs the same whether it's a $100 million movie or a $2 million movie, pretty much. Any question?
I mean, it would affect, you brought up about what it would affect in terms of deliverables, in terms of stems. It would be different than bringing in a full orchestral stem than a quartet stem. And so there would be that kind of consideration. But in terms of integrity, it would be always at that same level because that's what you do.
Do you think technology has helped in that regard, in terms of deliverables and, I'm thinking of things like real-time bouncers and,
Gosh, yeah.
like, just the physical time it takes to actually to create your deliverables. Has technology helped? Has it come along and helped in any way? It's not my area of expertise, but
Well, I mean, 5 years ago, we'd have to be shuttling around DVDs and hard drives and stuff, and now you can just
Yeah.
Dropbox everything. I mean,
That's
it saves
amazing.
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
time for everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to imagine doing a dub before, like just the physical act of getting something from one place to
Yeah.
the next was such a hassle, you know.
Yeah.
And now you just hit a button.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I was listening to a podcast from some colleagues of mine in New York, and they were talking about some of the earlier days working on film and in a dub room where they didn't have high-speed rewind. So and you couldn't really, today you start, stop, like you're talking about. Back in, then everything was like you get one shot, got to go back, and then you got to rewind the film in real time, and you got to do it again.
Wow.
And everything was delivered on, on 1,000-foot
Reels.
Yeah.
So technology, and today everything, definitely the offline bounce it's rough and crude for some things, but it saves a ton. Especially
Yeah.
like if you're doing, I would imagine if you have to make quick times or something like that,
Yeah.
it's great. So I think it's really helped a lot.
Okay. Well, maybe we should open up to some questions. Yeah? Well, hold on. we have a microphone for you. We want to record you.
Oh.
Hi.
Hey.
Is that something that you apply as part of your delivery? And do you think that hurts you or helps you? Because now you're opening up a whole can of worms in terms of choices for a director, right?
Yeah.
So I was just curious how you deal with that.
I mean, for score, I don't give alternate versions. And once a cue is signed off, it's signed off, and you give the split so they can tweak with it. But I don't, unless there was like a specific scene where we had two versions going, like to me, once it's approved, then that's it. But songs, I'm sure there's always like multiple stacked under so they can preview. I don't know about alternate mixes as much. But.
I've had composers give alternate cues because it was asked for. But I think most cases, like what Jeff was saying, is that when the cue is signed off, that's it. So yeah, it does happen, but I don't think it's offered.
No, I mean, I think you hope that those decisions have been made by the time you're on the final dub stage, and that you're not going to be having those conversations. But a little bit back to that, what we were talking about earlier about sort of problem cues. Sometimes that's you have to negotiate with a director, and that's the compromise position that you collectively arrive at, and you say, hey, you know what? Well, why don't we do this? We'll bring the cue that was delivered by the composer. We'll bring an alternate lighter version that's just strings, and we'll throw in what we had in the temp, and you can decide on the stage, because sometimes the decision-making process is very it's difficult for directors to let go, and this is this is their final 2 weeks where they have to really let go, and so I think you've got to be, I guess, empathetic to the kind of the psychology of what a film director's going through, which is they're about to be exposed finally to the world for who they really are as a filmmaker. And so the whole idea of alternatives, a lot of the time for me, has been about giving some control and power back to a director so that they feel like, oh, I get to make that choice when we get up to that point in the film, and I don't have to make that choice right now because I'm exhausted, or I feel bad, or lunch wasn't what I ordered, So, but I mean, sometimes the other thing we did on The Great Gatsby, Baz had this idea which we couldn't achieve fully to his satisfaction because it just was too much work. But he wanted, for every song, he wanted there to be a Lana Del Rey song, and then for us to have a 1925 jazz version of it that was playing at the same tempo in the same key that we could do a sort of sliding doors thing with. And he wanted that for every song in the film, which just we couldn't do it, but we did it. We did it for a number of the songs so that we could lean one way or lean the other when we were in the final dub. And he called it sliding doors, which makes perfect sense to me. I don't know if it
like a video
it
game.
does to you, but it's like a video game.
Yeah.
He would be like, "Oh, really? I think I want to go into 1925 now," and you'd sort of lean jazz, and then he'd be like, "Oh, now we're into something more intense and visceral. I want it to be, the very much the contemporary now version," and that's a whole next level version of wanting alternatives,
That's
which I wouldn't recommend. It cost a lot.
yeah, I bet.
Another question? Really?
Wow.
Okay.
May mix myself. So I think we have a unique opportunity because you rarely see music supervisor, music editor, and composer together in a room. And I was wondering how much influence each one of you have on somebody else, somebody else here being hired. So how much you as a music supervisor can recommend, somebody in the editorial position or somebody in, a composer, and who's looking after who too, or do you basically, I understand that most of the time would be, the right person for the job, not so much who your friend is, but how much of that, happens, and who gets to choose, so to speak.
Good question.
Well, look, certainly in my experience as a supervisor, it's really two questions, or maybe more than two questions. I hear two questions. Hiring a composer or identifying the right composer, I think is a really big responsibility for a supervisor, because you're trying to do a kind of it's a matchmaking exercise where you're trying to match a composer whose music displays the right sensibility for the project, but whose personality is the right chemical match for a director, and that matchmaking thing goes well beyond, Jeff and I are old friends, and we were kicking around having a beer, and I thought he'd be great to do Avatar 3. It's. I think you would, by the way. But
Sure.
it's because it's a big responsibility, because there are some projects and some moments where it falls on the supervisor to have difficult conversations because that relationship is not working out. Either the music's not right, or you have a director who says, I just don't want to be in the room with that person. I made a terrible mistake. You can fix it. And so I think that's a big area of responsibility for a supervisor, and to that point, it falls on you to really give everybody in that equation the best chance of success and the best chance of winning, and you have to, I think, really encourage and foster the right kind of communication and relationship through that process. And then I think for music supervisors, their biggest relationship through post-production is with their music editor, and I think it's a huge choice. And it's interesting because different studios work different ways. I'm talking about studio films particularly, but at Fox, where I worked, I would have to go and lobby very hard for certain music editors to my counterparts who work in the post-production department, because post-production hires the music editor, even though the music editor then automatically becomes part of the music team. And that's just one of those weird
dynamic.
Yeah.
For some reason, music editorial is in an editorial budget and not in a music budget.
That's right.
Which I kind of think is a right way to go in terms of budgeting, but as terms of choosing for the team, that is the right way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's that's an interesting dynamic too. I think supervisors, composers, and music editors are walking the same road very much hand in hand, and I think they're when it's working properly, I think that they're equally reliant on one another. To get to the finish line in a way that's delivers for the film in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Was there more questions to that? Or is it
I have a question.
Can I pass this to you? 1 second.
There's a lot of sites out there like Bar Jam that has music cue sheets for like music supervisors, but they're looking for as music, and a lot of them, you have to pay. And I'm kind of like skeptical on that because it's not really guaranteed, and sometimes, you want to be in direct contact with the music supervisor. As I use myself for an example, I had music for Christmas in Compton. So my thing is, I did it through a friend that that has helped me out. But my question is, how do I get a clue sheet as far as what the music supervisor is looking for and pinch it directly to them? Is there a way or a site, or is just through networking like now?
That's an extraordinarily difficult question to answer in a simple way, because it's. I don't think there's a single answer to that, because every music supervisor works in a completely different way, and every music supervisor I know they've got their people who they go to. So for me, there are certain sync people at certain labels and certain people at certain publishers who I know that they understand me and my sensibility, and that when I say, I'm looking for something that's a bit like this and a bit like this and a bit like this, and then they'll send things in, but often that just becomes the launch pad for finding what you really need. And that doesn't really answer your question, except that I think everything comes down to, I think filmmakers have a network of people they go to when they're trying to make a film. And I don't think there's anything wrong with these sort of song pitching services per se, but unless the person pitching the song has actually made a genuine kind of creative connection with a music supervisor or with a music editor or with a film director, unless that communication is actually real, it's just a folder of tracks sitting on my laptop that I go, I've got to listen to that stuff before the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like I think we're all short on time in our professional lives, and so when you find people who can kind of cut through the noise and say, look, I know you wanted 20 ideas. I've got 4 for you, but I think they're 4 really good ideas. That, in its own microscopic way, is what a good supervisor is ultimately going to be doing with the director, because directors don't want to hear 25 ideas. They want you to present 4 good ones. Sorry, that was a long-winded.
No, but it's a difficult question.
It is a difficult
It is. It's a really hard question of how do you get your songs to the right people so that you have an opportunity to get the exposure and placement that you're looking for. And there is no one answer.
Well, we might ask, Jeff, when you were in Denny's.
Yeah, right?
How did that work?
Well, that's a whole other extension of this story. So in my, how can I say this quickly? Right before I was about to leave town because I was broke and it wasn't happening, I had a friend who was a music supervisor who had a office in Santa Monica, and there's a studio that opened up next to him. And he's like, you should rent this studio. And I was like, I can't even, buy groceries. But so I got a cash advance, and I I rented this studio in Santa Monica next to him because he's like, and so I used to take the bus from West Hollywood to Santa Monica, this studio, and I met a cameraman on the original CSI who did a short film because my guy brought him in the one day, and I did the short film, and then that's how the producer on Miami saw my thing, and so it's a trippy story. So you just
awesome.
never know, man. It's like-
Exactly, yeah.
So the long and short of it is relationships then.
yeah, I would say two things to that too. Getting your music to supervisors is huge, but like getting it to music editors is good too, because like I've been on the dub stage so many times, or on like in a spotting session where there'll be like a scene where there's a song in the background, and if there's something in there and it doesn't rub them the wrong way, and it's not one of their scenes they're going to spend a lot of money, they'll be like, "That's cool, can we get that?"
Yeah.
And if the music editor put it in there, they'll be like, "Who is that? Can we get it?" And in 5 seconds, you just play something that, and I've seen it happen a lot of times.
Yes, I have.
And also, there's also like song, like pitching companies that, like my wife's a songwriter and she's with, it's called Cigar Road, but like, so they are another avenue to get independent artists to so they have actual relationships with supervisors, and that some of them are trusted. So Anton's going to call some of these pitchers and get that thing. So if you're in one of their stables of people, then you can get your stuff to someone who's going to actually listen to it. Because I personally, back ages ago when I was getting into this, all the taxi and all those things you had to pay for. I think there's better ways you can. I think if anything, there's no human contact. That it's just like a false hope, because it's just it's a way to make yourself feel like you're doing something. But it's really not, you know what I mean? Like, because it's way more complicated and soul crushing to have to pick up the phone and reach out to people who might not get back to you. But when you connect with someone, that way is going to be way better than something you can just hit send. You know what I mean? It's like that for all of it. I mean, it's
that's so well said. It really is about that human contact.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
My question is, as a supervisor, what is your advice for handling a combative relationship with a music editor to make sure you can still effectively do your job?
Wow.
What if you don't have a say in that, though, in actually determining if you can fire them or not?
A combative music editor. Okay. Well, go
they
for it.
exist.
There you go.
They definitely exist.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm being flip when I say fire them, because that's not the right solution. That's very tough. And if that's something you're dealing with, is that something you're dealing with, or are you speaking
asking for a friend?
hypothetically?
It's actually not. It's actually not something I'm dealing with. But on past projects I'm working with, I've had to deal with a combative music editor who just constantly is pushing back when, like, let's make this a little bit more friendly relationship.
It's hard because that's hard. I'm very lucky. Now you described that situation. I haven't had a bad experience with a music editor, because I think if everybody's working on even films that are really hard, in a lot of films are really, really hard to make. But even on the hard ones, as long as there's some level of sort of functional communication and a functional level of, hey, we're all trying to go over there, like, and so that the herd is moving in the right direction, then I think those things can be worked out through open and clear communication. But I understand if what you're saying is, it's a situation with a music editor who's not open to, trying out your ideas, where you go, oh, well, I really want to use this trap song in here, and I feel deeply that's what's going to speak to the audience. And you've got a music editor who says, no, trap doesn't work in movies. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure what not sure what the right solution is. I think I know what I would do, but I think I would try and find other ways to present my ideas to the director, and that's not by sidestepping the music editor. It's just by saying, I do have other alternatives. But I don't know. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I would really suss out the situation. Who hired the music editor? Is the music editor connected to the director, picture editor, composer? Where does that lie? And then what is the conflict? Is it a personality conflict? Is it a creative conflict? If it's a creative conflict, then the director will always be the one to resolve that. If it's a personality conflict, then I'm always up for one-on-one, let's talk, let's put work down aside. What's going on between us? What's happening here? Because we need to work together, and I'm getting this kind of resistance from you. So how can I best help you? And you best help me, because we are on the same team. So if none of that is workable, then, I'm kind of leaning this way of saying, it's got to go. You're all working together. So, but if it's like really, this person's really attached to the composer or attached to the director, then it's a struggle. And so then it becomes a communication. How do you work together? It just, without getting to details, but it's like if you're trying to present songs and there's a lot of resistance to those songs, why is that? What is that? Or again, is it personality? I'll share this. Years ago, I was brought on to temp a film, and the picture editor brought me on, and it was one of a well-established picture editor, and I have done a number of movies with this person, and he wanted me to temp it because he knows what I would do for temping on this film. And there were 2 music supervisors on the film that were constantly bringing me scores and that I knew were not going to work, and we're on a really tight scenario. So I told the picture editor that I'm really having trouble because I've got these stack of CDs that I need to go through, and we've got to get this reel done, and I just can't get everything done. And the picture editor banned the music supervisors out of the editing room for the next 3 weeks. So I finished the temp. We did a temp mix. Everybody loved it. There was a hiatus of a week, and I wasn't asked back. So, which is okay. It's fine. But it became a thing. So much so that it went all the way up the chain to Spielberg had to listen to the temp score and go, what's wrong with the temp score? So it's really an interesting dynamic, and I would just really go to the personal level of how can we work together? Really exhaust that. And if it can't, then I would bring in help. Are you associated with the director? Bring the director in. Are you associated with the producer? Bring the producer in. All about resolving conflict. That's and if it's unresolvable, which there are times, there are extenuating circumstances, and I didn't have any issues with the music supervisors. I just didn't have the time. And I wouldn't have suggested don't have them come in, but maybe give me less, but I never really had that. It was taken right out of my hands. So, and that, I did my job. I think I did a good job. In fact, I know the music editor who replaced me called me and said, I don't know what to change here. You did a good job. And I'm like, well, thank you for letting me know. I feel better about that. But these dynamics happen, it just happens. So without knowing details, I don't know really what else to say other than know who everybody's associated with so you know how to communicate with everybody because you're all on the same team.
How you doing? My question is, would you suggest trying to break in through the business to get placements or be a composer in film to go through, let's say, put your music through these music sound libraries through like Sony and those to get, because they do have direct connects to you guys, to like the music editors and music supervisors? Or is there a better way to go about it, trying to break in or break through?
What was that one?
Are you speaking?
I'm a
About-
composer. I mean, I
Yeah,
produce
no, sorry. My
for
question
my
was:
end, let's say.
Are you talking about actually composing
For film.
score composing for
Yes.
screen?
Yes.
Well, you got the right person to ask right there.
Okay.
Well, yeah, there's a big difference from like if you want to make tracks and license them, that's one thing, as opposed to scoring a film or a TV show, because it's a different. But if you want to make like library tracks, like cues that sound like score, but you want to license them, then getting them in. I personally think putting stuff everywhere and anywhere is good because you just never know who's going to. I mean, you have tools that people before you didn't have. You can get your stuff out there.
I agree.
So put it as many places as you can because you just never know, right? And just by doing, you get better. But as far as if you want to score films, then it's like you got to figure out.
Or is it more of a not what you know, who you know? Because I'm getting that feeling. Like to get, you know what I mean?
It's like that all the time. It never changes though.
Right? It's Hollywood, right? It's Hollywood, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and that goes back to what we were saying about it's like such a relationship and people
Based,
business
driven kind of thing, right?
It's always like that, no matter where you are in your career. I think it's just that's how it works, and so I mean, it sucks because you're like, it's such a big. There's nothing you can tell anyone because
exactly. Because I feel there's a lot of.
But it's
composers.
Like put yourself out there as much as you can because you're just giving you more opportunity. You're just putting the odds in your favor because we all get rejected 90% of the time anyway.
It's part of the game.
Get those,
just
find that 10% that's going to do something, and at least if you're doing it, you're putting the odds. You're taking action to make something happen for yourself because a lot of people never take that first step, and you just because they want their first step to be perfect. Where I'd rather fall flat on my face on my first step, and then you get up and you just do it again. And because we all fail, I mean, in different ways doing this. That's just part of this business. And no matter what you do in it, it's just. And I think the sooner you realize that you're gonna fail, that it's okay, and you watch anyone's, any super famous person's speech or at a graduate, they're always like. Fail often and
100 times before they win. Get that one win, right?
It's failing. It sucks.
Part of the game, though, right?
And everyone says don't take it personally, but of course you take it personally. But that's okay. And then you wake up the next day and you just do this. But I from my personal experience, I never any of the things that happened to me along the way. I never. If you talked to me the day before, I never would have seen it coming. You just never know. This town is crazy, one day to the next.
I agree to that.
You never know. So.
Thank you very much.
I think I would just add to that, it's like what we say in school to the students, it's like it's really about peoples and it's about networking. That's really what it is. It's like who you just do everything, like what Jim was just saying. Put your music everywhere, do everything. And just be a part as much as of anything you can.
Gotcha.
But it's, I mean, we're all like, I hate networking,
I know, right?
It makes it harder.
I'm not saying you have to go out and like hand everyone your card, and because it's all, it's weird. It's like you might meet someone in the hall.
Yeah, definitely.
And 5 years from now, they might remember, so it's like, I don't think it's like being this in your face and selling to everyone all the time. Well, that works for some people. That never worked for me. Like we all have, you have to know what you're good at and what you're not, what your personality is.
You got to be in the room. That's the deal.
You got to be
but
at least be in the room,
just
right?
Be who you are, and you might meet someone that's doing something totally unrelated, but they're going to remember you or have a friend, and that's how it happens. It's like you're planting all these little seeds that you can't see, But you just have to be patient. You just got to stay in the game. You just have to figure out a way to stay in this town.
Dude, so well said.
Appreciate it.
So true.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Anybody else?
Another question,
I just started working as a music supervisor, and I had a director say to me recently that he values his sound department above all because it says that people's ears are less forgiving than their eyes, and it spoke to the comment you made about how you can really salvage something that's not working through music or through sound design or mixing. I'm just wondering, do you feel that level of respect from directors you work with for music, or do you see like with like shrink?
How's she
you know,
spelling respect?
with like shrinking budgets? Do you see-
What does that mean?
I don't know. I guess like another way to maybe quantify it is like when all budgets for the whole productions are shrinking, are the music budgets shrinking in like relative to the rest of the budgets that are shrinking, like keeping in mind how crucial and critical the music is or the sound is to the films and productions, or like
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are shrinking. I mean, well, I just spent 5 years working at Fox in the film music department as an executive there, which means I'm an in-house music supervisor. In that time, I mean, I watched our budgets, our music budgets, as a proportion of the overall film budgets. They were pretty stagnant, and if anything, you know, on the lower budget films, they were shrinking. And I mean, I often felt working at a studio, I often felt like, you know, from the perception to the outside world is, oh, you know, we're the film music department at 20th Century Fox. You know, that must mean something. But within the studio, often I think it was kind of like, you guys are just next to visual effects and post-production and, you know, next to the other departments, you guys are just such small fry. Just do whatever you do and don't fuck it up. You know, that was... No, do you know what I mean? It was like, I mean, I think we, you know, within the ecosystem of a large studio, whenever the music on a film was great, or we had a breakout because, you know, there was a song or there was a Oscar nomination or any of that other stuff, and we suddenly got noticed, people would be like, oh, they're pretty good at their job, aren't they? You know, that's...
They know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But to come back to your original question, that stagnation or that sort of, you know, shrinking of film music budgets, you know, certainly we had to become, you know, in the 5 years I was there, had to become more resourceful and figure out other ways of doing things. And, you know, most often that had to do with, you know, ways of recording, you know, symphonic sounding orchestral scores in increasingly clever ways, where you go, okay, well, now we're going to have an A orchestra and a B orchestra, you know, and the B orchestra is 30-piece and our A orchestra is 60-piece, and, you know, then there's that other horrible word, augmentation, you know, which is layering in, you know, synthetic elements, and, you know, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's a trend that'll just continue, or if it's going to turn around. I haven't.
You never know.
Idea.
Every film is different. But to speak to the other part of it is, I think, from my observation of working with music supervisors, it's not a question of respect, but it's really a question of relationship. And when you know, you build this relationship with a director that is personal, then they start relying on you because you know each other and you know each other's tastes, and so that kind of builds your brand, and which is a word I'm not really want to just, you know, say, hey, there's a brand, but it's about trust, and I'm kind of equating those two together. And that just takes time. And also know that you're not always going to fit with everybody. And it's taken me a lot of years to realize that I don't always fit, and that's okay. And that the people who do like what I do, they're the ones that want to bring me on, and we work together and collaborate. And that's part of what you were, you know, going back to you, is just getting it out there. And same for you. You just never know who you connect with, you know. And, you know, for you and your Denny story is like that one guy. I had this one connection. And I think that's just part of the ebb and flow of it all. So it's just staying in there and seeing how it all unwinds.
I think we got time maybe for one more question.
I have a technical question.
Yeah, all right, all right.
For composers, with the workflow and the amount of work that now composers have to do in such a short span of time, is there anything in your workflow that's changed, either dropping one DAW and adopting a new one? For example, there's some composers have stopped using Cubase and now they do Pro Tools because ultimately it's going to be delivered in Pro Tools. Is there anything like that in your workflow that's changed or that you've done differently now to be able to work?
No, I think the
faster?
opposite. I think the best is to not change, to just get good at whatever you're good at and
Yeah.
just be fast. And,
Yeah.
because there's always tech, but you got to think most of the time they're just trying to sell you something. You know?
Yeah.
So it's just like, don't fall into that trap and just
Yeah.
learn to use what you have and get fast at it. And
Whatever's going to keep your creative flow flowing and not a technical shift is what I would say follow that. If this particular sequencer evokes creativity in you, then there's something about that I think you should honor.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for the panel.
cool, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.